So first, Sensei, just tell me a little bit about yourself and your experience in the martial arts, please.
Okay, my name is Arcenio James Advincula. I began training in the martial arts in 1946. I was born in Juneau, Alaska, and when I went to Anchorage, Alaska right after the war, I'm a new kid on the block, so a lot of kids started picking on me. They started beating me up and everything else. They didn't know what ethnic group I was. Since I'm in Alaska, most of them thought I was native. So many of them would have derogatory terms, and they'd say ching ching, Chinaman, dirty Jap, klooch, Siwash, spick, dago, wetback. They didn't know what I was, so they called me this. So one day my father bought me a brand new cap and a brand new jacket. And then some kids ganged up at school and took my cap and took my jacket. Then when I went home, my dad asked me where the jacket and the cap is. I said some kids beat me up and took them. From that day on, my dad brought some Philippine Scouts to the house. It was just right after the war. So the Philippine Scouts were people that had just got out of the army in the Philippines, and they started teaching me what they called hand-to-hand combat. They called it combat judo and eskrima. So I learned, that was my first introduction into the martial arts, was combat, what they called combat judo, and eskrima, which is a Philippine knife and knife fighting. And that's how I started. Later on, my dad would bring other people to the house. My dad worked for the Army Air Force at that time. That was before they called it just the Air Force. And anybody that claimed they knew something, my dad would bring. A lot of them came from overseas. They'd start showing me what they called Gung Fu and all this. Well, I joined the Marine Corps, and then in 1958, I go to Okinawa. So about 4 days after I get to Okinawa, on December 1st, I begin studying Isshin-ryū Karate. I marry an Okinawan, and so I go back and forth to Okinawa on several tours. And during my time on Okinawa, I dabbled with some of the other martial arts. I studied, since Isshin-ryū is supposed to be a combination of Shorin-ryu and Go-Judo, whenever I got a chance, I studied with Go-Judo, a little bit of Shorin-ryu, and I also studied a little Ryukyu. And then later on, after my teacher died, Shimabuku Tatsuo Sensei died in 1975, I went and studied with Iha Kotaro in Bunkai, Kobudo. And I've been at it ever since.
What is kata? What exactly is kata? Where did it come from? How long has it been around? Do all martial arts have kata?
As for kata and where it came from and how old it is, I have no idea. I do know one thing, that in Okinawa, kata is the backbone. Kata is considered, without kata, you have no karate. As a matter of fact, I have a saying that karate begins with kata and ends with kata. If you're in Shorin-ryu, they normally say kata begins with naihanchi and ends with naihanchi. If you're in Go-Judo or Ryukyu, they normally say karate begins with sanshin and ends with sanshin. Shimabuku Tatsuo Sensei naturally got his sanshin from Go-Judo. The difference is, in Go-Judo it's the first kata, in Ryukyu it's the first kata. But Tatsuo Shimabuku had it as the 10th or the 8th kata, the last kata. And one of the reasons was, he said if it was taught incorrectly taught, it would be too hard and too stiff. So he always had it as the last empty-handed kata. But I'm a firm believer that kata is the backbone. Remember, we're in martial arts. We teach a philosophy. We also teach that karate is not to win. It is not to lose. That's an Okinawan basic philosophy. People that are into free fighting and all that, at a certain age, will no longer practice it. And then they will deteriorate and go away. In karate, we learn kata, and we can do this from the beginning, and we can do it to our end. And my teacher always said it was for health and fitness. And if nothing else, if all we did was kata and stayed healthy, then what the hell? To give you an example, at my age right now, I still practice kata, and I believe that it's for health and fitness, and it keeps me agile and everything else. If I didn't do this, if I was free fighting all the time, I would have quit years and years ago.
But at the same time, as you said, it is a martial art, so it is based on defense and so what can you find in kata that will help you in an actual confrontation?
First thing, a lot of kata movements do not work simply because of the way it is taught. Some people over-exaggerate the move and everything else. My belief is, and this came from Shimabuku Tatsuo, that it should be natural. And anything we do should be more natural and not forced or anything else. And if we practice and we learn these, to give you an example, I'm one of the founders of the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program. The basic stance that they stand in is Seisan. We don't call it Seisan, they call it Marine Corps fighting stance. And we call it Seisan stance. And that in itself gives us something. So if it's good enough for karate, it's good enough for the Marine Corps. And this is exactly what it is. Now they don't practice kata, but they practice moves out of kata. A basic punch is a punch and it comes out of kata, it comes out of kion, same thing. But I'm a firm believer in kata tradition. We're learning karate do, a way of life, a philosophy. Now people say, oh, that won't work in real combat. Incorrect. Marines are still using it in combat, okay? So it still works. It depends on how it's taught. That's the whole thing.
So as far as Bunkai goes, can you talk about Bunkai and how it, how it goes together?
Years ago when karate first came to the United States by a lot of the Marines, actually it was the servicemen overseas that started learning karate. Most Marines, when they were in the Isshin-ryū dojo, we'll talk about Isshin-ryū, but it was the same thing when I went to Ichido, it was the same thing in Goju-do and everything else. If Americans were learning it, in most cases they were interested strictly in jukumite, just free fighting. They were not interested in kata, they weren't interested in bunkai. But I was interested in bunkai. So my belief is, if you are learning kata and you're not learning bunkai, which is the application of a technique, then forget it. You're not learning anything. You're just going through motions. Matter of fact, you're going through a dance, nothing else. Matter of fact, the same thing. And it's not just the kata. You don't just live off of kata. We also live off the kion. We live off kion. How well we do our basics sets the standard. Then how well we do that is how well we do in kata, and after that it's how well we do in kumite. So kion, kata, and kumite, the three things, they all work together, just like mind, body, spirit. Everything works together, which is the most important thing of a three-legged stool. It's the same thing. All are important. So it's not one aspect. But kata, I'm a firm believer in kata.
Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I'm a firm believer in kata, but I'm also a firm believer in kion. I'm also a firm believer in kumite. I'm a firm believer in makiwara. I'm a firm believer in kote katai and all these other things. It's not one thing, it's everything. But kata is the backbone. It's the one thing that puts a style together. It's one thing that unifies a system. And who sets the standard? The teacher, the founder. He sets the standard. Ryu is way, a method, a style. If you're actually following that method, then you want to find out, what did the teacher do? How did he do this? Today now, everybody throws their own stuff in, and then to justify it, they say, my teacher taught me this. And then we got 20 people teaching that their teacher taught this, and nothing even comes close to each other. And there's where the disunity. Had everybody had a basic standard, then that would be good. You follow a certain set standard, and that's it. Now you have within that, we have the hidden techniques and anything you want to make of it. But everybody should be doing a basic standard if you want unity. It's as simple as that. The Marine Corps has one patch. They have one uniform. I went to an Air Force school in Lauer Air Force Base. This is when I came back from Okinawa in 1970. You're supposed to come in a Class A uniform. We have A, B, C uniforms. Everybody came in with every uniform. For 1 week, the CO of the school kept saying, we are a military organization, we should all be in one uniform. After a week, he stopped telling it because everybody didn't change or anything. You understand?
Yeah.
And that's the importance of unity. Everybody wears one patch, one uniform, one standard. And now you can have modifications within that because even the Marine Corps does it. But we basically follow one rule. Whose rule? The Commandant of the Marine Corps' rule. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. Thank you, Sensei.
Got that in.
Yep, you got that in.
Mahachi Kata. Kata.